All
right.
right.
All right. Well, thank you, Kate, for joining me today. Just wanted to talk about the census and get your perspective on why the census is important dates, those types of questions. So I have a list of questions I'm going to ask you, and I'll let you take it away. So, Kate, why is the census important?
The census is extremely important for, especially for Durham and North Carolina. We are set to potentially get another congressional seat with an accurate count. So that's more representation in Washington from North Carolina. And I think most critically is it's the money that it brings into our community for important critical services like public health, public education, transit, jobs programs, food programs like WIC. All these things that we need to do to rebuild our state and our community over the next 10 years after this pandemic period. All that funding. So every resident that's not counted, our local community, our local budget loses $16,000 over the next 10 years. So that's a really compelling reason to get every single person in your household counted.
Right. And when you say every person in your household, even your children, what if I'm undocumented? Should I fill out the census as well?
Absolutely. So the great thing about census is that everyone counts. This is also an election year. Not everyone is eligible to vote, but everyone, citizens, non-citizens, children, babies, everyone counts in the census. Anyone living in the United States as of April 1st and residing here in North Carolina on April 1st is to be counted in the census. So it's a real way to show up and say, hey, I count, Durham counts. This is just a really critical time and something really positive we can do to ensure our community has the funding that we need.
And so just to reiterate, so that everybody that lives in Durham County by April 1st should fill out the census. Right.
Absolutely. One member for each household. So it's not like each member of your household has to go in and complete the census. You designate one person to complete the census and respond for each member that lives in your house. Anyone, even if you have a newborn baby that was born on April 1st, that baby needs to be counted in the census, because when you think about it, that baby will be starting preschool, maybe Head Start, public school when they're 5 through 10, and that's the next 10 years of that baby's life. They're going to need the services that the funding from census money provides.
Right. And so one of the things that I noticed, this is my, I think, second time filling out the census. The first time I was in college, so I'm not sure I got the census the first time. But it's online now. So what happens if I don't have a computer? Am I still going to be able to fill it out by paper, or is it only online this year?
That's a really good question. So this is the first year that we can take the census online, which is really great. You can go on your mobile phone too, if you have access via mobile phone, to 2020census.gov. But there is a phone number. So if you call the census phone number, you can respond, and you can respond in multiple languages by just calling it in.
Okay.
So if folks don't have access to technology, they can at least get on a phone and call in their census data for each member of their family, and it takes less than 10 minutes. Also in April, every single household who hasn't responded yet online or by phone will get an invitation to complete the census by mail. Okay. So the Census Bureau is really asking us in this time to do it in one of those three ways: by phone, online, or using the mail in copy, because they want to send out less people on doors. We don't know what the status of quarantine or stay at home is going to be. Right. And a lot of people don't want to knock at the door. So that's what we say to people: get the census done right away. You'll avoid a knock at the door. And most people are like, oh, okay, I'll do it right now.
Right. Yeah. Exactly right. And so, it's today is March 26th, I believe, or 27th, yes. 26th.
Yeah.
I should have received, the invitation to fill out the census already, correct?
Yeah, earlier this month, between the 12th and the 20th, you should have received at least one invitation to take the census. I think my family has received 3, but I took
Yeah.
the census even before I got any one of those 3 mailers. The invitation you get by mail has a code on it, but you do not need that code to respond to the census online or by phone. That is, just one way to enter, what household you are. So I did it without the code. That's what we're coaching people on taking the census is, hey, just go online or just call and do it. You don't need to go dig out that mail that you may have thrown away or brushed off. Just go online and respond for your family.
Gotcha. And so my next question is, there's a lot of information that I'm giving about myself to the Census Bureau. Is my information confidential?
Absolutely. So it's required by law that people respond to the census, and they've also made it required by law that your personal information is confidential for 72 years.
Mm-hmm.
So no census taker or census staff or the Census Bureau is not allowed to release personal data about you or your family members. That is, not shared with any government agency. They really protect that data. It's used to figure out the formula of, how many congressional seats we get and what our funding formula is, and just getting the landscape of who's living in this country at this time for a big data set. It's not, none of the personal data is ever shared by any department.
Okay, great. And so, what if I'm a college student? Like I said, I didn't fill it out last time. So I'm 29, so 10 years ago, I was 19. I think my college counted me,
Yeah.
So I guess a 2-part question here is that, what if I'm a college student that for some reason is still at the school, or, I'm at home because of the pandemic. Like, how do I handle that as a college student?
That's a great question. So it depends. Like where were you living before this happened? If you're living off campus, you need to respond where your apartment is or where your off campus location is. That's how you respond to the census, and you'll need to go in and do it. If you were in a dorm, and your campus likely has counted you in their group enumeration. So you'll want to check with your college campus. I'm sure on their website, they'll have information about the census and where you were counted. So make sure that you were counted on your college campus. If you were living in a dorm that now you've been sent home, you probably were already counted by your campus. Now, community college students, they get counted where they're living. The campuses do not count any of those students. So it really only impacts students that were living in dorms, that their campuses are likely have already counted them. But any student who lived off campus, you need to take the census at where you live. One member of your household needs to count you.
Okay, and so I guess I'll follow up to that question. So if I'm a college student and I'm at home with my parents, can my parents count me in the census, or is that going to be a double counting if I was counted at school and now I'm back in my parents' household? How should my parents handle that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would check with your campus, go online, make sure that they will have instructions as to, and an update as to the census count. And so just double check, just say, hey, was I counted at my school? Just check in on your campus website. And if you were living in a dorm, most likely you were, so then your parents would not count you.
Okay.
That's how that works. It's a little confusing. We're in this whole new land. And I'm sure there probably will be some double counts just because of the confusion, but we want to only count everybody once. And so if you can just sort of look into like, hey, has my campus already counted me as part of that dorm, or do my parents need to count me? That's what we need to do right now.
Got it. And so, Kate, what are some of the important dates that I should look out for in filling out the census, and when is this information going to actually be useful, I guess, to my community?
So April 1st is Census Day, and so April 1st is sort of the day that's where you're counted in place. And now, unfortunately, they've had to move back some of the counting processes due to people being, quarantined and stay-at-home orders. So the timeline has been shifted a little bit. Originally, the count was going to be completed. All the door knockers were going to be done with their jobs by end of July. Now they've extended that to August 14th. So we have until August 14th to get all of the count in. And we want to make sure that Durham is at least an 82% count.
Okay.
So the mailers should be starting to arrive on April 8th. You'll get the invitation to respond by mail for anybody who hasn't responded already. And then hopefully we'll be able to get back out in the field, and all these census jobs will actually be able to go live. There's a lot of jobs available with the census, but right now, it's kind of unsafe. They're waiting to launch those census jobs.
Yeah.
So they're asking as many people as possible to respond by mail, by phone, online. And then by December 31st, by law, the census data is delivered to Congress and the president to give them the full report of the census of the United States. And importantly, that data is then used in March of 2021 is official, and that's what our state is going to use to redraw our congressional districts based on how many congressional seats we are appropriated. So when you think about all of the maps that are drawn for our legislative districts and our congressional districts and how many times they've been in and out of the courts over the past few years, that map drawing process is going to happen in the next General Assembly. So all of the lawmakers that we're sending to the North Carolina General Assembly here in November, they're going to be the ones responsible for drawing our maps based on the new census data.
Gotcha. And I want to piggyback off of that as well, is that, it's not just, Congress and state, the local districts are redrawn as well based upon the census data, so local city councils, school boards, boards of commissioners, all these things, the census data comes into that, in my job, that's something that, we are trying to also, with UK, educate people about that, your local city council could change as well, based upon the census data. So even more reason to fill it out. And as Kate said at the beginning, we're going to get probably a new, congressional seat. Right now we have 13, so we'll have a new district, the 14th district, and so that's even more reason to fill out the census.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so is there anything else you want to share that people should know about the census? Like, we covered a lot of different areas, but just wanted to give you the space to talk about anything else that we might want to know.
Yeah. Well, I want everybody to reach out to everyone in your networks and just double check that to make sure that they have completed the census, and to, now that you've learned this, to make sure that your community knows the facts and the information about the census, and to avoid scams. Unfortunately, the census also brings out the people trying to collect personal data, and the census never wants to collect your social security number, your credit card numbers, will never ask you to support a political candidate. So you got to watch out for that and know the facts. So point people to 2020census.gov. There's the phone number is on that, and we will send this out in the slide deck as well. And call your neighbors and check in on everybody. Make sure, like, hey, have you gone in and done it? I can walk you through the steps. It's really easy, and this is why it's so important. Everybody that counts in our community brings another $16,000 into our local budget for these things that we need so desperately. The services that are provided by this funding, transportation, jobs, healthcare, schools, food, nutrition, all of the things that we really need here in Durham. So encourage everyone to take the census, make sure your whole list of contacts has done it. There's also a really great map of the hard to count areas that we have right here in Durham and North Carolina. And it shows where the response rate was the lowest in the last 2010 census. So we want to make sure all of the folks in those areas are priorities for getting out the count. And it'll take us networking since we can't be together. So it's going to take all of us getting on the phones and all of us asking our friends and neighbors to make sure that you're counted.
Right. And so if people have more questions, I'm sure our contact information will be in the slide deck, or in the email. How should they contact you?
They can contact me at kate@youcanvote.org is the easiest one. I'm also the executive director of You Can Vote here to make voting easy and accessible this year as well. And we'll send out my contact information. And we also have a Durham Census page. It's durhamcounts.org. And then of course, 2020census.gov is your best site for any census questions, is 2020census.gov.
Yeah. And if folks have questions, they can contact me as well. I work at the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, and my email is mitchellbrown@scsj.org. If anybody has any questions. But Kate, thank you so much for your time, and for sharing such wonderful information. And look forward to everybody getting counted. So thank you so much, Kate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
All right.
All right.